Gotcha. Thank you. There we go.
Okay, the third step prayer is on page 63. God, I offer myself to thee to build with me and do with me as thou wilt. Relieve me of the bondage of self, that I may better do thy will. Take away my difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those I would help of thy power, thy love, and thy way of life. May I do thy will always.
All right, Bill. Thank you. I really appreciate it. All right, we left off on, let me get there, page 58. We were at the very beginning of chapter 5, how it works. So we're at the very top of the page there. A couple of things. This chapter was written in 1938. We'll talk a little bit about this first paragraph. It's one that is referred to quite often. It does refer to the 12 steps, the program, and the spiritual path. So we'll just kind of take a look at that, and we'll talk about it as we go along. Bill, if you'll go ahead and get us started with chapter 5 and how it works.
All right, top of page 58, chapter 5, how it works. Rarely have we seen a person fail who has thoroughly followed our path. Those who do not recover are people who cannot or will not completely give themselves to this simple program. Usually men and women who are constitutionally incapable of being honest with themselves. There are such unfortunates. They are not at fault. They seem to have been born that way. They are naturally incapable of grasping and developing a manner of living which demands rigorous honesty. Their chances are less than average. There are those, too, who suffer from grave emotional and mental disorders, but many of them do recover if they have the capacity to be honest.
Okay, so a couple of things. Rarely have they seen a person who has failed, who is thoroughly, and this is important because we've talked about this in the past, you know, the number of people that join AA, of those that really truly give themselves over to the program, about 50% of those people, the ones that give themselves over and really dig into the program, about 50% of them will get sober fairly quickly right after. Another 25% of that same group will get sober over a period of time. And the rest of the people that really try and join either will in time get better. They may not stop drinking, but we kind of have that as a an unscientific statistic. But when we talk about thoroughly following our path, we're talking about that spiritual path, which includes the 12 steps and really the overarching program that's outlined in the program of AA. And I think the important thing here, and they've mentioned it 3 times, and that is the word honest and honesty. This is one of the things that is important for an alcoholic to do, and that is to really admit that that they are in fact alcoholic. And I'm not talking about admitting to another person. I'm talking now personally and admitting it to yourself, but thoroughly being honest about that and getting that into kind of an internalized kind of belief. And it's important to believe it. If you don't, you're the demands of the program, which it does take some work, are going to elude the person trying to get sober, and they're just not going to make it. So with that, I think that the important point here is the two points. One is that those that truly give themselves over, roughly 50 to 75% of those that do will find them they're getting finding recovery and becoming sober, but it does require an absolute commitment to honesty, and I mean that sincerely from the inside, not just to the other people. Bill?
Yes, Yeah, well, like Leo mentioned, honesty is mentioned 3 times in this first paragraph. So it's really, really important that we get honest with ourselves. Do I really need this? Am I really an alcoholic? I mean, if I'm not honest with myself, this isn't going to work. And basically, this is giving us exactly what we need to do, the requirements for what we need so that we can get sober. All right, the next paragraph. Our stories disclose in a general way what we used to be like, what happened, and what we are like now. If you have decided you want what we have and are willing to go to any length to get it, then you are ready to take certain steps. Want me to keep going or stop here?
We'll go ahead and stop because of a couple of points here that this is a good transition paragraph. And in a general way, what we used to be like. One of the things that changes here is that if you have decided you want what we have and are willing to go to any length to get them, then you are ready to take certain steps. So I think it's important that they do reference you in this particular moment, but also those certain steps. It's not just some of the steps; it's all of the steps, and it is the program that AA has outlined. And it also is that you want to go to any length to get it, and we are looking for that psychic change. Bill?
Yeah, and also what they said in here, you're willing to go to any length to get it. And he tells us what any length means. It means you're ready to take certain steps. It doesn't mean you're going to go to 9,000 meetings. It doesn't mean you have to go out in a blizzard. It just means you're ready to take certain steps. That's what going to any length means. All right, the next paragraph. At some of these we balked. We thought we could find an easier, softer way, but we could not. With all the earnestness at our command, we beg of you to be fearless and thorough from the very start. Some of us have tried to hold on to our old ideas, and the result was nil until we let go absolutely.
Yeah, it's important to let go absolutely and to be fearless and thorough from the very start. And this is a recipe, if you will. What Bill is doing is basically saying that, rarely have we seen a person fail who has thoroughly followed our path. Somebody that is totally honest with themselves and is willing to go to any length, meaning that they are willing to do the steps that is being outlined in this book, and being fearless. And again, there is that word thorough from the very beginning. We see it again here, thorough from the very start. So what's important here for the newcomer and or the sponsee that you might be working with and going through all of this is that idea that you've got to be absolutely sure, absolutely willing and ready, absolutely honest and fearless from the very beginning, that you are going to do this no matter what. So kind of those are the general idea that's being outlined for us. Bill?
Yeah, in here it says, we thought we could find an easier, softer way, but we could not. In other words, this is the easier, softer way. This is the best way to get sober, is to go through this process. We try to do it in different ways, and it usually doesn't work. And it tells us the last sentence, the result was nil until we let go absolutely. Nil means zero, nothing. We're not going to get nothing until we follow this process. Okay, the next paragraph. Remember that we deal with alcohol, cunning, baffling, powerful. Without help, it is too much for us. But there is one who has all power. That one is God. May you find him now.
Yeah, and remember, it's a kind of one of those things that I like to say at this point, and that is remember that we can't remember. It's important that we do, in fact, remember that we are dealing with alcohol. And yes, it is cunning, baffling, and powerful. I mean, we have already admitted that we are powerless over alcohol and that our own self-will and self-knowledge is not going to get us over the finish line. Without help, and that is our higher power, it is going to be too much for us. And we talk about that here. And also, may you find him now. Now is the only time that you can actually do something. It's not in the past. It's not in the future. It's right now. Rob, I'm sorry, Bill. I'm
Okay, the first new paragraph on page 59. Half measures availed us nothing. We stood at the turning point. We asked his protection and care with complete abandon.
And that complete abandon also means complete surrender. And I'll also make a note here is that it involves honesty, willingness, and the ability to surrender and let go. And from a standpoint of letting go, it's important that you know that for me, it was that constant fight that I was always going at with myself, and the fight that I wanted to drink, knowing that I needed to stop, and the want to drink and the need to stop was in conflict with each other, and I was struggling mightily with that. And it wasn't until I let go completely, where I actually said, enough is enough. I give up. I can't do this anymore. I've got to change. That there was this thing this overwhelming kind of a wash of feeling that came over me. And it was my spiritual kind of experience that I had, where I actually allowed myself to let go, let something else come into me, and it was my higher power there, and began to recover. So a complete abandon. So it's try to for a newcomer to be able to explain what that means, and that is a complete surrender. Bill, what we'll do is instead of stopping at each one of these, we'll go ahead and read through all 12 steps, and then we'll go back and talk about them in more of a breakdown fashion. Bill?
Okay, we're on page 59. Here are the steps we took, which are suggested as a program of recovery. 1, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. 2, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. 3, made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood him. 4, made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. 5, admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. 6, we're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. 7, humbly asked him to remove our shortcomings. 8, made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. 9, made direct amends to such people whenever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. 10, continued to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. 11, sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood him, praying only for knowledge of his will for us and the power to carry that out. 12, having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to alcoholics and to practice these principles in all our affairs.
Yeah. Isn't it interesting? I think that a lot of meetings will actually start out and they'll read the steps, and a lot of people are probably not listening to what those steps are. But let's break this down just a little bit. All right, so I'm going to give you a couple of things that I have found that helps me to kind of break out what these steps are and what they mean to me. First, I would break down that steps 1, 2, and 3. And I wrote this out to the left in my book, and that is that these are the foundation steps. This is what needs to happen in quick succession, and it's that point in time where you finally sit down, admit to yourself that you're powerless over alcohol, that you need assistance, and that you need assistance from a higher power. Steps 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. 4 through 9 are what I call the action steps. And a lot of stuff has to happen in there where you are personally doing things, whether it's a step 4 and a step 5, or a step 8 and a step 9, or some of the stuff in the middle of there, 5, 6, and 7, when you have a lot of personal internal work that you're working on. I call those the action steps. And then steps 10, 11, and 12 are what there's two terms I give to it. One, it's either the growth steps or the maintenance steps. And that is once you've gotten into you've gone through all of the steps and have worked through that, you're now doing your steps 10, 11, and 12, primarily step 11 more than anything else, and then step 12 when you're carrying this message forward. But I call these the growth or the maintenance steps. Now, if I was to break each one of these steps down and apply a word to it, I would tell you that step 1 is the honesty step. I wrote these out to the right of my book. Step 1 is the honesty step. Step 2 is the step of hope. Step of hope. Step 3 is the faith step. Step 4 is courage. I call that the courage step. Step 5, I call this one the integrity step. Step 6, I call this the willingness step. Step 7, I call this one the humility step. Step 8, and it's important for all of us, but I call this the forgiveness step. Step 9, and this one is the justice step. And the biggest amend I'll also make a note of is to your higher power. Step 10, I call this the perseverance step. Step 11, I call this the awareness step. And step 12, I call this the service step. Bill?
Yeah, basically what Bill did, he listed all the 12 steps here, and this is the process we're supposed to follow. And for me, the important thing is the first sentence right before the steps. Here are the steps we took, not here are the steps we sat around and talked about taking, which are suggested as a program of recovery. This is telling me the program is the 12 steps. The program is not going to meetings and drinking coffee and eating donuts and talking about my stuff. That's what I thought the program was when I first came in. This book tells me the program is the 12 steps. And the only way you can do a 12-step program is to do the 12 steps. And in my opinion, the best way to do it is to go through it with a sponsor. If you try to do this stuff all by yourself, it's really easy to get mixed up. Okay, we're on page 60, the first new paragraph on page 60. Many of us exclaim, "What an order! I can't go through with it." Do not be discouraged. No one among us has been able to maintain anything like perfect adherence to these principles. We are not saints. The point is we are willing to grow along spiritual lines. The principles we have set down are guides to progress. We claim spiritual progress rather than spiritual perfection.
Yeah, and I think there's a couple of key words here. One is that there's a willing to grow, a willingness to grow along spiritual lines. These are guides. This is guidelines on how to do that. And then there is progress on it, not perfection. So what does that say to me? It means that from the very beginning, a lot of people will struggle a little bit with some of the steps. They'll forget something, or they'll remember something after the fact. And there's an easy path of getting discouraged and kind of saying, to heck with it, I can't do this. It does sound fairly daunting when you take it all as a whole, but it's like, how do you eat an elephant, one bite at a time. So it does take little bites at a time. It does take some work to do in order to get there, but the guide, the way this book is outlined and the way it's laid out, I think is a better way of saying it. It helps you kind of break these steps down. And remember, if you break the steps down and you kind of work with them and through them, and especially as Bill said, and I completely agree, working with a sponsor with that, you've got some assistance there to get through these steps. You can get through it, and it is something that once you've even been through the steps, you're really not done. And it's not as if all of a sudden now everything changes. It's something that changes even more and more over time. And that's what you're really looking for, is that positive change that goes in the right direction. What is the next right thing to do, and continue to do those right things, that you're going to find that everything is going to improve, and it's going to improve over a given period of time, so that, tomorrow should be better than today. Next year should be better than this year, so on and so forth. And I'm not talking about things that are happening in and around us in our environment and that type of thing, because those are the things that we don't really have control of. I'm talking about the things that you do have control of, and that is you and yourself, and working through these steps, and doing the best you can, and continuing to better yourself, so that you can be a better person for other people. Bob? Bill, I am sorry. I got Bill and Rob put all together. That was a slip. I apologize.
Okay. Like Leo pointed out, we're not trying to be perfect. We're just trying to make progress. If I try to be perfect, I'm going to let myself down, because I'm never going to be perfect. As long as I'm making progress, I'm moving in the right direction, and that's really all that matters. All right, the second paragraph on page 60, a description of the alcoholic, the chapter to the agnostic, and our personal adventures before and after make clear three pertinent ideas. A, that we were alcoholic and could not manage our own lives. B, that probably no human power could have relieved our alcoholism. C, that God could and would if he were sought.
Yeah, and so really this is just breaking it down even further for us, so that we have the idea that is behind this program. First of all, there's reference back to where we talk about the alcoholic and more about alcoholism. There's a chapter on the agnostic and talking about accepting of a higher power or God, and personal adventures, the Bill's story, the story of Jim, and the story of Fred, et cetera, et cetera. And we bring out these ideas, and we're talking really about this process, and that we were alcoholic and could not manage our own lives. Well, that's just another way of saying step one. Probably no human power could have relieved us of our alcoholism, and a lot of that has that human power. This is important here. It's no human power, and that that God could and would if he were sought. And in other words, finding that higher power, having a willingness, just a willingness to believe in a higher power is really that first step to recovery. Bill?
Yes, like Leo pointed out, the willingness, that's the key to this whole thing. As long as you're willing to look for something or find something, you're going to get something. Okay, the next paragraph, being convinced we were at step 3, which is that we decided to turn our will and our life over to God as we understood him. Just what do we mean by that, and just what do we do?
Okay, so we're getting right there. There's a couple of questions. We'll answer it. We are at step 3. We haven't finished step 3. So we're going to kind of work through that step itself over the next page or so. And really this is just, all right, here's step 3. Here's what it is. And just what do you mean by that? And just what do we do? The good news is that they always answer the question. And we're going to be talking a lot about our thinking and our actions. Bill?
Yeah, well, what Bill's doing here, he's declaring that we've already covered step 1 and step 2, because now we're at step 3. He didn't really tell us in 1 and 2 where we were, but now he's telling us we're at step 3. So logically, that means we've already covered step 1 and 2. That's why we're at step 3. Okay, the next paragraph. The first requirement is that we be convinced that any life run on self-will can hardly be a success. On that basis, we are almost always in collision with something or somebody, even though our motives are good. Most people try to live by self-propulsion. Each person is like an actor who wants to run the whole show, is forever trying to arrange the lights, the ballet, the scenery, and the rest of the players in his own way. If his arrangements would only stay put, if only people would do as he wished, the show would be great. Everybody, including himself, would be pleased. Life would be wonderful. In trying to make these arrangements, our actor may sometimes be quite virtuous. He may be kind, considerate, patient, generous, even modest and self-sacrificing. On the other hand, he may be mean, egotistical, selfish, and dishonest. But as with most humans, he is more likely to have varied traits.
Sure. And this is really kind of starting to answer some of the questions that he has here. What do we mean by that? And just what do we do? Well, first of all, trying to describe the individual. And first requirement is we be convinced that any life run on self-will can hardly be a success. In other words, we have now admitted that our own self-will, our own self-knowledge is not enough for us to be able to not only stop drinking and become sober, but to truly recover and to be able to take this message and this program and intertwine it, through the fabric of our lives, as well as carrying the message forward. And we give kind of an example here, and all of us can kind of, I think, relate to it. And that is that, from time to time, we take control, try to run the whole show. We're going to use our own self-will and our own self-knowledge to impart whatever it might be on ourselves and on others. And yeah, sure, we're going to try to get what we want. We might be a little bit manipulative in the process, and it come across as being kind and considerate. But on the other hand, there is that being mean, egotistical, and a lot of it being selfish and dishonest, and obviously some varied traits. And what we're really describing here, and we're going to over the next page or two alongside working on step 3, as we're working on it right now, is the human condition. And that affects us all. Everybody suffers and thrives with the human condition. It's just a part of us. And we're going to kind of talk and refer back to that as we go through these next couple of pages. Bill?
Yeah, if you notice right in the first sentence, it says the first requirement. Up to this point, Bill was calling everything a suggestion. Now he's getting a little more pushy. He's telling us it's a requirement. If you really want this, you're going to have to do this stuff. It's not just a suggestion anymore. Now he's telling us we have to do it. All right, we're on page 61, the first new paragraph. What a lot of people do with this paragraph, they either put their own name in there or they put the first person, I or me or my. So it kind of hits home more. But anybody can read this any way they want. I'll read it how it's written in the book. What usually happens, the show doesn't come off very well. He begins to think life doesn't treat him right. He decides to exert himself more. He becomes on the next occasion still more demanding or gracious, as the case may be. Still, the play does not suit him. Admitting he may be somewhat at fault, he is sure other people are more to blame. He becomes angry, indignant, self-pitying. What is his basic trouble? Is he not really a self-seeker even when trying to be kind? Is he not a victim of the delusion that he can wrest satisfaction and happiness out of this world if he only manages well? Is it not evident to all the rest of the players that these are the things he wants? And do not his actions make each of them wish to retaliate, snatching all they can get out of the show? Is he not, even in his best moments, a producer of confusion rather than harmony?
Yeah, and it's that adage of what we do and what we are is what we're kind of trying to describe here. And again, just like Bill had said, you can interchange I in for the word he, for example. I began to think life doesn't treat me right. A lot of us have been there. A lot of us may still be there where we don't think that life is treating us right. And we use that self-pity, as I would call it here, to exert myself into things and more to others. Again, trying to manipulate and control. And what we find is people don't like that. They push back, they retaliate. And we get upset with that, and we think that it's something that they are doing as opposed to something that we are doing. And an important point there is that a lot of our problems, most of our problems, almost all of our problems are self-generated in regards to something that we either have done or haven't done, or something we've said or haven't said, et cetera, et cetera. And it gives us basically that's where we are. We're in some level of trouble. And this, as they talk about it, this delusion that we can wrest satisfaction and happiness out of this world if I only manage it better. If I only, and then what happens is my grip gets tighter on everything. My control tries to overwhelm things, and it just doesn't work. And I will say that all of this that we're talking about right here, this delusion that you can wrest satisfaction and happiness out of this world, if you manage well. If I can only get sober if I just try that much harder at it. I know what I'm supposed to do. I know that I can do it, but yet I can't. What's going on? And that is the biggest stumbling block to sobriety. This is the biggest stumbling block, I think, to sobriety. Bill?
When Bill wrote this, he's basically trying to show us what we're like. He wrote it in the third person, he and him, but he really means you and me. So when you put yourself in there, it just makes it hit home a little better. All right, we're on the last paragraph on page 61. Our actor is self-centered, egocentric, as people like to call it nowadays. He is like the retired businessman who lolls in the Florida sunshine in the winter, complaining of the sad state of the nation. The minister who sighs over the sins of the 20th century. Politicians and reformers who are sure all would be utopia if the rest of the world would only behave. The outlaw safecracker who thinks society has wronged him, and the alcoholic who has lost all and is locked up. Whatever our protestations, are not most of us concerned with ourselves, our resentments, or our self-pity?
Yeah. Wow. Are we concerned with ourselves, our resentments, and our self-pity? That's a big indicator that you're being very self-centered, very egocentric, and irrespective of what you are, whether you're retired, whether you're a full-time worker, whether you're a father, a mother, a brother, a sister, etc. The idea here is that you are only concerned with yourself, And when they talk about protestations, which they mean disagreements, are not most of us concerned with ourselves and our resentments? Of course, this is a big deal for a lot of us, is that we only are thinking inwardly, and we're only thinking of ourselves and not thinking of others. And it's that transition, that change from thinking about ourselves to thinking about others, that truly is an indicator that change is afoot. Bill? Okay,
we're on the top of page 62, the first new paragraph. Selfishness, self-centeredness, that we think is the root of our trouble. Driven by 100 forms of fear, self-delusion, self-seeking, and self-pity, we step on the toes of our fellows and they retaliate. Sometimes they hurt us, seemingly without provocation. But we invariably find that at some time in the past, we have made decisions based on self, which later placed us in a position to be hurt.
Sure. And this is one of those really hard things for an alcoholic to really get and grasp. I mean, we've all got resentments and they've mounted, they've layered on top of themselves, and there is a mountain of them. We are driven by 100 forms of fear, self-delusion, self-seeking, self-pity, selfishness, self-centeredness. Boy, it's a lot of self here going on. People retaliate. And sometimes it's without even provocation. It's because of something in the past that we have done that they now, instead of letting you do it again, or before you do it again, even if you are going to, they start to retaliate. And we think, well, what's going on? Why is this person upset with me? Why are they mad? Why are they angry, etc.? And yet we never stop to think, what did I do? What did I contribute to this behavior that I'm now experiencing from somebody else? Bill?
Yeah, he's mentioned self 6 times in this paragraph. He's basically telling us that we create our own trouble. Yeah, there's possibility that sometimes things happen that we had nothing to do with, but most of the time, our own troubles come from ourself and our selfishness and our self-centeredness. Okay, the next paragraph on page 62. So our troubles, we think, are basically of our own making. They arise out of ourselves, and the alcoholic is an extreme example of self-will run riot, though he usually doesn't think so. Above everything, we alcoholics must be rid of this selfishness. We must, or it kills us. God makes that possible. And there often seems no way of entirely getting rid of self without his aid. Many of us had moral and philosophical convictions galore, but we could not live up to them, even though we would have liked to. Neither could we reduce our self-centeredness much by wishing or trying on our own power. We had to have God's help.
Absolutely. And this is a great paragraph that just kind of summarizes the human condition that we all suffer from. And this focus on me, that's my life, it's my fault. And coming to terms with that is a struggle. And it's something that is enlightening when you do, but our troubles, we think, are basically of our own making. That's right. That's my life, my fault. They rise out of ourselves, and the alcoholic is an extreme example of self-will run riot. We refer to that self-will run riot a lot, and that craziness that we create of our own lives, and then we gather prisoners and find ourselves exerting this on other people. And what a chaotic life it is when you've got not only yourself doing that, but when others around you are doing the same thing. So it can get quite crazy. But above everything, we must rid ourselves of this selfishness. And that's really an important point here. To be able to let go and to be able to start to think about other people. What is it that my wife might need, or what is it my brother is trying to accomplish, and how can I help, etc. And talking about the sponsee that is trying to stop drinking, that is trying to get sober, that is trying to get true recovery, and what is it that you can do to contribute to that and that benefit there. And finding that instead of saying, okay, this is what I'm going to do, it's what would you have me do when you're talking to your higher power, and letting go and getting that guidance from your higher power as you move forward. Bill?
Yeah, the book is basically telling me here that it's my fault. It's not saying it's everybody else's fault. And I like the one statement he says in there, above everything. You think that means it's important? Above everything, we alcoholics must be rid of this selfishness. We must, or it kills us. So much for this is a selfish program. This book is telling me I have to get rid of selfishness or it's going to kill me. Okay, the next paragraph, the last paragraph on this page. This is the how and why of it. First of all, we had to quit playing God. It didn't work. Next, we decided that hereafter in this drama of life, God was going to be our director. He is the principal. We are his agents. He is the father, and we are his children. Most good ideas are simple, and this concept was the keystone of a new and triumphant arch through which we pass to freedom.
Right. So this is the how and the why of it. All right. We have to stop doing what doesn't work. Stop doing what doesn't work and stop playing God. Stop playing the that I have control. I'm going to do this come heck or high water, and find yourself in that in failure. And what is this thing called a keystone? If you kind of look at an arch and you see the kind of call it a rectangle, but it's not really a rectangle. I'm not sure what the shape is called, but it's the very top stone that is set on top that puts pressure on everything else in the arch, makes it an incredibly strong structure and one that's very hard to break. That's what we're talking about here with this keystone, and turning your self-will over to your will over to the power of a higher power, and letting go. And again, back to this very personal, very private, and very honest process that you have to go through with yourself, and then taking that and letting go and asking for guidance on how you can be of service or help to other people, especially sponsees and newcomers to the program. Bill?
Yeah, but basically Bill's giving us some real good instruction here, how and why. He's telling us how to do it. Quit playing God. And why? Because it didn't work. That doesn't work when we try to play God. And realistically, what he's saying is let go and let God. If you're playing God, you can't pray to God. What are you going to do? Pray to yourself? He's telling us that we got to put our feet, keep our head where our feet are, down on the ground, where we're not in charge of the universe. Okay, now we're on page 63, the top of page 63, the first new paragraph. When we sincerely took such a position, all sorts of remarkable things followed. We had a new employer, being all powerful. He provided what we needed if we kept close to him and performed his work well. Established on such a footing, we became less and less interested in ourselves, our little plans and designs. More and more, we became interested in seeing what we could contribute to life. As we felt new power flow in, as we enjoyed peace of mind, as we discovered we could face life successfully, as we became conscious of his presence, we began to lose our fear of today, tomorrow, or the hereafter. We were reborn.
Okay, this is a paragraph that is known as the third step promises. And we'll kind of go through them just real quickly here and identify them. The first one is that he provided what we needed if we kept close to him and performed his work well. That's promise one. Promise two is established on such a footing we became less and less interested in ourselves, our little plans and designs. The third promise, more and more we became interested in seeing what we could contribute to life. Promise 4 is as we felt new power flow in. Promise 5, as we enjoyed a peace of mind. Promise 6, as we discovered we could face life successfully. Promise 7 was as we became conscious of his presence. Promise 8, we began to lose our fear of today, tomorrow, or the hereafter. And promise 9, we were reborn. These are the third step promises, and really it kind of just breaks things down as to what's the good that can come out of this letting go and stopping the attempts of trying to control things on our own willpower without the assistance and help of a higher power, and letting go and asking for that guidance. If we ask for that guidance, this is what we start to experience. And each of us maybe not experiences all of these or in any of order here, but you begin to start feeling the good that comes from letting go and letting a higher power into your life and starting to think of others. Bill?
Yeah, the first sentence he says, and we sincerely took such a position. What position? They told us in the previous paragraph on the previous page, we're going to stop playing God. We're going to let God be God, and we're going to be human. Once we take that position, we start getting these promises. They may not all come at once. They may come little by little, or they may come all at once. But this is what we get in the third step when we start realizing that we're not in charge of the universe. Okay, the second new paragraph on page 63. We were now at step 3. Many of us said to our Maker as we understood him, God, I offer myself to thee to build with me and do with me as thou wilt. Relieve me of the bondage of self, that I may better do thy will. Take away my difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those I would help of thy power, thy love, and thy way of life. May I do thy will always. We thought well before taking this step, making sure we were ready, that we could at last abandon ourselves utterly to him.
Okay, and this really constitutes doing step 3. And that's also, we thought well before taking the step, making sure that we were ready. So now, having read the third step prayer, you have essentially completed step 3, and you get to move from one place to another. And I think one of the ideas here is to stop or pause and think, and really kind of try to ask yourself, what is the next right thing to do? After having this step, you've let yourself over completely, and you feel that relief, that your shoulders drop a little bit, things calm down, and you have a chance to really think about what's going on. And step 3 is a decision or an idea step. So it's something that you really have to kind of internalize completely in order to do that. And just like Bill said, to stop playing God, let God be God. Bill?
Yeah, the step 3 prayer, like Leo said, this is basically taking step 3. That's really all that's necessary. Step 3 is not a working step. You don't have to get up and do anything or write anything. All you have to do is say this prayer. Very, very, very simple. It's not hard at all. Okay, and the next paragraph, the third paragraph on page 63. We found it very desirable to take this spiritual step with an understanding person, such as our wife, best friend, or spiritual advisor. But it is better to meet God alone than with one who might misunderstand. The wording was, of course, quite optional, so long as we expressed the idea, voicing it without reservation. This was only a beginning, though if honestly and humbly made, an effect, sometimes a very great one, was felt at once.
Yeah, and this is really kind of forming that relationship with your higher power. And it is something that you do want to say out loud. It's important, I think. They had a strong belief back then that you would actually get down on your knees and in front of somebody and actually say this prayer out loud. They don't actually talk about your sponsor, but a sponsor is also somebody you could talk to other than, which again, these are great people to do this with, your wife, best friend, or spiritual advisor. They could also add in, or your sponsor. They just weren't using the word sponsor back then. And just to drive the point home, this is really something that's very simple, but it is something that is important, that you're being totally and 100% honest. You are in fact giving yourself over, and you're willing to let the higher power help guide you through the things going forward. Bill?
Yeah, but Bill's giving us instruction here on who to do this with. You can do it with an understanding person, and he uses the term spiritual advisor. They didn't have the term sponsor back then. That's probably the closest thing this book says to a sponsor. It could be anybody that's trying to get you through this spiritual program. And he also says it's better to meet God alone than with somebody who might misunderstand. So you can do step 3 with someone else, or you can do it all by yourself. Whatever makes you comfortable, whatever works. There's no specific way it has to be done one way or another. And it says the wording was, of course, quite optional. If you don't like this prayer and you want to make up your own prayer, that's fine. Some people do that. As long as you keep the same ideas, that's all. And it also says voicing it. When you voice something and you say it out loud, you can't take it back. You know, if I just say this prayer in my head, I can make believe I didn't really say it or I didn't really mean it. When you say it out loud, you did it, and you have to go along with it. I heard an old saying one time, you can't take something back if it's broken or spoken. Once you say something, that's it. It's out in the universe. You can't make believe you didn't say it. Okay, now and it says also that we sometimes an effect was felt at once, sometimes a very great one. Some people, right at step 3, they start having their spiritual awakening or spiritual experience. Some people have to go through the whole rest of the process before they have it. It comes to different people at different times. There's no right or wrong way to have a spiritual awakening. As long as you get something that's helping you get better, you're heading in the right direction. Okay, the next paragraph, the last paragraph, it's just 2 lines on this page. Next, we launched on a course of, yes?
Let's go ahead and let's stop there for today, because it's
okay.
Jump into step 4 and we only have a couple of minutes left. So I'm going to ask
okay,
you,
right, good.
If you wouldn't mind just summarizing what we've just gone through for these first few pages of chapter 5.
Basically, chapter 5 is probably this here, how it works is the most read and least paid attention to thing in AA. They read it almost in every single meeting and nobody pays any attention to it. There's really, really, really good stuff in here. What Bill's doing right here in this first part, he's giving us 3 requirements that we have to do in order to get this process. First, he's telling us we have to be honest. And they're not talking about cash register honesty. They're talking about being honest with ourselves. Then he's telling us we have to be willing to go to any length. That's the second requirement. And the third requirement is we have to abandon ourselves to God. And like Leo pointed out, that means surrender. A lot of people don't like the word surrender. So Bill took the word surrender out of here and he used the word abandon. All that means is we're supposed to surrender to God and ask God for help. And then he's got the steps listed. And again, the best way to understand these steps is go through them with a sponsor. If we try to go through this in a 1-hour session, it's going to confuse a lot of people because there's a lot of stuff in here that sometimes you just need to sit down and go over it quite a few times before it sinks in. And he's basically telling us here how to start and get prepared for step 3. In other words, we have to quit playing God. We have these requirements. We're not in charge of the universe. I had to give up my job as superintendent of the universe, and I had to realize somebody else was in charge. It wasn't me. And then when I went through all of that and I got that through my head, like the promises that are in here, Leo went through each one of these promises, that this is what happens when we stop playing God. The more I play God, the less this stuff is going to work for me. I have to get rid of that idea. I'm not in charge of the universe. God is, and I have to let God be God. and that's that. And notice it's said in here in these promises, we're less and less interested in ourselves, our little plans and designs. It calls my plans little. Why? Because compared to God's plans, my plans are almost nothing. They're very, very small. God's plans are bigger. Then he gives us the third step prayer, which is basically how people take step 3. You can use this prayer. You can use a different prayer. You can make up your own prayer, whatever. Basically, you're just saying that you're offering yourself to God. That's all. To build with me and do with me as thou wilt. Wilt is like the past tense or something of will. It means will. He just used the word wilt. I don't know why. And it says, relieve me of the bondage of self. Not the bondage of alcohol, the bondage of self. I'm my own problem. And that's what this was trying to get across to me here, going through the beginning of this third step, getting prepared for it. I'm the problem. The problem isn't everybody else. My bondage is bondage of self, not bondage of alcoholism. And then it says, take away my difficulties. What are my difficulties? As far as alcoholism goes, my difficulties are the mental insanity that makes me drink against my will, and my romancing the drink and thinking that a drink is a wonderful, good thing for me to have. I'm asking God to take that stuff away. And when he takes that away, that victory over them may bear witness to those I would help. In other words, God, you help me get through this stuff, and I'll bear witness. I'll tell my story to other people so they can get better. And what I'm doing, I'm making a deal with God here. God, please help me get through this, and I'll help some of your children get through it. That's basically what we're doing with this here step 3 prayer. And this is like a wonderful thing here, because a lot of people, right at step 3, when they go through this, they start to recover right at this point. AA number 3, if you look forward to the second edition, it says he recovered immediately. In other words, he went through 1, 2, and 3 when Bill and Bob were talking to him, and he had his spiritual experience or spiritual awakening, and he walked out of the hospital a free man. Now, of course, in order to keep it, he had to go through the rest of the process, but he got it right at step 3. So this step 3 is the step 3 prayer is one of the most important things in this book. That's all I got. Thanks a lot for letting me share.
Bill, thank you very much. That was wonderful. All right, we'll close things out with the Serenity Prayer. Bill, if you'll lead us through that.
Okay, the Serenity Prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference.